I never thought I'd admit it, even to myself. But the truth had a weight I could no longer ignore. How does one reconcile love when it comes from the most unexpected place? My name is Emily, and for 10 years, I had believed my marriage to Tom was the anchor of my life, steady, reliable, predictable. On the surface, he was everything a woman could want, charming, successful, and careful not to cause waves. But over time, the warmth that had once drawn me to him faded into polite routines and quiet silences. There were moments, fleeting yet unmistakable, when I realized the spark I had once cherished was nowhere to be found. And then there was David, my stepfather. He had entered my life when I was 14, after my mother remarried. At first, he was polite but awkward, a stranger navigating a family that had already endured its own scars. Yet he didn't push, he waited. He listened, remembered details about my life, and offered small acts of care that didn't feel obligatory. The quiet way he noticed when I was stressed, the gentle reminders about my favorite books, even the way he laughed at my awkward jokes. These were the threads that wove a bond I hadn't realized would endure. It was a late evening in my mother's old kitchen, the air scented faintly with lavender and polished wood, when I first noticed how different it felt being near David. His presence was comforting, grounding, yet carried a subtle electricity that made my chest tighten. I caught myself lingering over his words, drawn to the attention he gave freely, the kind of attention that Tom seemed incapable of providing anymore. The conflict was impossible to ignore. How could someone who had been a background figure in my childhood suddenly feel more present, more attentive, more alive than the man I had chosen to spend my life with? I felt guilty, anxious, yet undeniably drawn to him. Every thought of David sparked warmth and curiosity, while every interaction with Tom left me hollow and restless. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights filtering through the curtains, and realized that I was standing at the edge of a choice I hadn't anticipated. The weight of desire, longing, and truth pressed down on me, and for the first time in years, I questioned everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and happiness. I knew that the next step I took, whether forward or backward, would change my life in ways I could not yet predict. And as the clock ticked past midnight, I felt it, the unmistakable pull toward a forbidden yet undeniable truth. I am Emily, 34, married to Tom for 10 years. On paper, he is everything a person could hope for. Successful, dependable, polished in every way. He remembers birthdays, pays the bills on time, and maintains the kind of stability many people long for. But stability, I discovered, is no substitute for intimacy. Over time, our marriage had become predictable, a series of polite exchanges and unspoken disappointments. Tom rarely asked how I truly felt, and I began to feel invisible in a life I had once believed was mine. David, my stepfather, had been part of my life since I was 14. When my mother remarried, I was wary, unsure whether this man would respect the fragile spaces of my childhood. But David didn't push. He waited patiently, offering small gestures that felt genuine rather than performative. He noticed the subtle tremor in my voice when I was anxious, remembered my favorite novels, and laughed at my awkward jokes in a way that made me feel seen. His care was steady, unobtrusive, and utterly sincere. In him, I found the emotional depth that my marriage with Tom lacked. The contrast between my husband and stepfather was startling. Tom, though kind, was emotionally distant, wrapped up in his work, his routines, and his own concerns. Our conversations rarely reached beneath the surface. A polite nod, a hurried, "How was your day?" These had replaced the intimacy that once drew me to him. David, on the other hand, listened. He remembered. He responded with empathy that penetrated layers I hadn't even realized I'd built around myself. It was in the little things: a reassuring glance, a quiet joke, the simple act of making me tea exactly how I liked it, that I felt valued and alive. Our home had always been a blend of warmth and memory. The kitchen smelled faintly of lavender, the wooden floors creaked under familiar footsteps, and the sunlight slanted through lace curtains in a way that made even ordinary afternoons feel magical. I spent countless hours with David here, talking, laughing, and sometimes simply sitting in silence, feeling understood without a single word spoken. Those moments lingered in my memory, reminding me of a bond that was both comforting and complicated. Yet, as the years passed, the clarity of my attachment to David became harder to ignore. The warmth I felt in his presence contrasted sharply with the growing emptiness in my marriage. I was caught in a web of conflicting emotions: guilt, desire, loyalty, and curiosity. How could I reconcile the love and attention I craved with the life I had chosen? The tension grew quietly but persistently, shaping every thought, every action, until I realized that ignoring it was no longer an option. As I lay awake at night, the memory of David's patience, his laughter, and the way he seemed to understand me more than anyone else pressed against my chest like a secret too heavy to keep. I knew that the next encounter with him could tip the balance, pushing me toward a truth I had been avoiding, one that would challenge everything I believed about love, fidelity, and happiness. It began with small moments, almost imperceptible at first. A text from David in the morning: "Don't forget to eat today. Thinking of you." Innocuous, harmless, yet my chest tightened as I read it. I felt cared for, in a way that Tom, my husband, hadn't provided in years. I told myself it was just kindness, a memory of his stepfatherly concern lingering in my mind. But the feeling wouldn't fade. Every visit to my mother's house became a battlefield for my emotions. David's presence was magnetic, yet gentle, a steady warmth that I had longed for without fully realizing. He leaned slightly closer when we talked, laughed at my jokes, and noticed the smallest details about me. Each glance, each word, seemed to penetrate the protective walls I had built around myself. I felt alive, acknowledged, and, most dangerously, drawn to him in ways I had forbidden myself to feel. One evening, we were organizing old photo albums. I held a photograph of myself as a child, David kneeling beside me, smiling gently. "You've always been stronger than you knew," he murmured, and the tenderness in his voice made my throat constrict. My hand brushed his as I handed him a photo. A spark, brief, fleeting, shook me more than I wanted to admit. I pulled my hand back, guilt pricking at me, but the warmth lingered. The tension wasn't just emotional. It was physical, subtle, and undeniable. I noticed the way my pulse raced when he spoke, the catch in my breath when his fingers accidentally brushed mine. I tried to retreat, to immerse myself in work or routine, but thoughts of David intruded relentlessly. In contrast, Tom's presence at home was a reminder of absence, of conversations unspoken, of a distance that no polite exchange could bridge. One night, Tom called while I was at my mother's. "Dinner tonight?" he asked, distracted, oblivious to the storm inside me. I answered automatically, "I'm busy," and hung up, my heart thudding. I realized then how stark the difference had become. With David, I felt seen. With Tom, I felt invisible. The moral line I had sworn never to cross seemed thinner each day, bending under the weight of my own desires. The pivotal moment arrived when David spoke softly, almost a whisper. "Emily, I can't pretend I don't care for you." My heart stopped. I wanted to protest, to remind him of boundaries, of our roles, of what was right, but the honesty in his voice mirrored the truth I had been hiding from myself. The air between us seemed charged, trembling with emotion, understanding, and unspoken longing. I left that night with my mind spinning. I knew I was standing at a crossroads. One path leading to safety and routine with Tom, the other to vulnerability, honesty, and perhaps forbidden love with David. My pulse was a drumbeat of uncertainty, my heart a compass, pointing in two directions at once. And yet, a part of me knew that whatever came next, my life would never be the same. The night it all came to a head, the world outside seemed impossibly still. I sat across from David in the dim kitchen light, the scent of lavender from my mother's home, mingling with the faint warmth of his presence. Every shadow, every flicker of the candle felt amplified, mirroring the storm inside me. I realized then that I could no longer ignore the truth. My heart had shifted, quietly but irrevocably, toward him. "I can't keep pretending," I whispered, barely audible. My voice trembled, betraying the weight of years spent suppressing emotions I barely understood. "Every time I'm with you, I feel alive, and I can't feel that with him anymore." David's eyes softened, and he reached for my hand. The touch was gentle, deliberate, and filled with a care that cut through layers of guilt and fear. "Emily," he said, his voice low. "I've felt the same for a long time. I never wanted to cross the line, to take advantage of your loyalty or your marriage. But pretending I didn't care, that became impossible." I felt tears prick at my eyes. It wasn't lust that tethered me to him. It was understanding, acceptance, and the unspoken knowledge that he saw me fully in ways Tom never had. My pulse raced, a mixture of fear and relief, as if the truth had been waiting quietly for us to acknowledge it. We sat in silence, hands intertwined, letting the enormity of our emotions settle over us. I thought of Tom, of the decade we had shared. My love for him hadn't vanished completely, but it had been overshadowed by the absence of intimacy, by years of polite indifference, and in David's unwavering attention, I had found the reflection of the love I had always craved. Gentle, sincere, and patient. The revelation hit me like a tidal wave. My feelings for David were not fleeting, not superficial. They were deep, embedded in the years of connection we had built, in the moments of shared laughter, whispered confessions, and quiet understanding. I had been searching for this depth all along, not realizing it had been in front of me since my adolescence. "I don't know what this means for us," I admitted, voice trembling, "or for my marriage. But I know I can't go back to pretending everything is fine." David squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement of the complexity of our situation. "We'll figure it out," he said softly. Not recklessly, but honestly. No lies, no denial. That night, I left with a mixture of fear, longing, and clarity. I understood that my life had reached a turning point, the point where truth could no longer be avoided. I was standing at the precipice, aware that the next steps I took would change everything. My marriage, my family, and my understanding of love itself. And yet, for the first time in years, I felt awake, present, and unafraid of confronting the depth of my heart. The days that followed were quiet but heavy, filled with conversations I had long avoided. I spoke to Tom with honesty I hadn't dared to summon before, explaining the emotional distance I had felt, the emptiness that had grown between us, and the bond I had discovered with David. His face was a mixture of disbelief, hurt, and quiet resignation. It was painful, yet necessary. Truth, I realized, was far more liberating than pretense. David and I didn't rush into anything physical. We allowed ourselves to explore the emotional landscape we had long denied, taking small, deliberate steps to understand the complexity of our feelings. Each conversation, each shared silence, deepened the connection that had been forming quietly for years. It wasn't about impulsive passion. It was about care, trust, and the rare intimacy that comes from truly being seen. I also learned about forgiveness, of others, and more importantly, of myself. I hadn't planned for love to arrive in this way, nor had I expected the moral ambiguity that accompanied it. Yet acknowledging my feelings openly granted clarity, strength, and a renewed sense of agency. Life, I realized, wasn't about following a predefined path. It was about confronting the truths of the heart, even when they defied expectation. Looking back, I see the difference between comfort and fulfillment, routine and passion, obligation and truth. My marriage had provided stability, but David had awakened me to what it felt like to be truly understood, noticed, and cherished. I carry both experiences with me, grateful for the lessons learned, aware of the complexity of human emotion, and conscious of the courage it takes to face uncomfortable truths. Love, I discovered, isn't always neat or convenient. Sometimes it comes from unexpected places, and sometimes it forces us to confront who we really are. I am not perfect, nor are my choices, but I am honest with myself in a way I never was before. The path ahead is uncertain, but I face it with awareness, reflection, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing the difference between being seen and merely being present. And so, life continues, messy, complicated, and beautiful in its unpredictability. I walk forward with the knowledge that love is not confined by convention or expectation, and that the heart, when listened to carefully, can reveal truths that the mind may resist, but the soul recognizes.